meeting to order at 7:37. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I assume the Pledge of Allegiance was done at the town meeting, right?
We did.
Yeah, okay. I'll open it up to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room?
I can't go without public comment. Dave Gauthier, 3219 Phelps Road. I just have one comment, and then we're going to do all your work. One suggestion about the treasurer position that I think you should, no matter which way you go, I think it would be beneficial to add this. This issue came up with the past treasurer who fell to a scam and the town lost $7,500. And I brought this issue up at the time, and it may still be on the table, I don't know. So I'll read to you what Chapter 91 of Section 712 of the statute says for duties of selectmen. And I think once you hear it, you're going to want to do something. The treasurer, in my opinion, should be fully bonded. I don't know how many millions, but the treasurer should be bonded. Okay, the treasurer is not required to be bonded. But and I'll give this to you. This section of the code says, and it talks about duties of selectmen. Quote: "They shall require of the treasurer a sufficient bond with surety, conditioned for the faithful discharge of the duties of his office. And the selectmen who fail to require such bond shall be jointly and severally liable to the town for all monies not accounted for by the treasurer." End quote. So I think it'd be very beneficial for the town to either require or provide the bonding if you want this.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
And I'm going to let you go.
So that's, you said this is a statute?
General statute, Chapter 91.
Chapter 91,
That's what it said, so
section.
I don't know if it
subsection 12.
really applies, but I think it's worth looking at.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Any other public comment in the room? No? I don't see anybody on Zoom. Check. Okay, so, we've taken a lot of, I guess, maybe I should update the meeting with the selectmen. Was everybody able to listen to the meeting with the selectmen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Were you there, Matt? The selectmen's meeting? Oh, okay. So essentially, the selectmen agreed that we should have more time, so they've given us to the end of October to report back to them.
Is the meeting early November?
November 6th.
November 6th.
So, so we have until, we have to schedule a public hearing before we report back to them, but essentially they've given us 2 more months to finish our work. So that was the outcome of the meeting. And they were appreciative of the work that we've done in understanding of the, some of the challenges that we faced. So, so there really wasn't any, I think, any objection to us continuing. So with that said, we've had a number of meetings. We've listened to a lot of testimony, both from people we've interviewed. We've had a lot of public comment at our meetings. We've done some research that we've distributed at meetings. We've been providing provided research, and recently is just a few minutes ago. But we have not really had an opportunity to review that information and deliberate about what we've heard. So I think, this is the opportunity for us to just talk about what we've heard so far and try to figure out what, where we want to go from here, what we want to look at, and how we feel about what we've heard to date. So with that, I guess I'll open it up to comment from members.
Who wants to go first? I'll go first. Lois
Okay.
first. Elizabeth Kaplan. So I'm late to the party. I have gone back and listened to all the audio for the previous meetings. I read the minutes, and then I felt like the minutes were not really doing justice to what maybe was happening at the meeting. So I was listening to the audio of the meetings. There's a couple meetings that aren't online, so I feel like maybe I've missed something. The early June meetings weren't online.
Well, one of them
Is that
had
the-
technology problems and
okay.
it didn't record it all, so we couldn't. put
Okay, I
that.
assumed that was the one that I was missing. So when I got to the next one, it referenced things in the one before that I never heard.
Yeah.
Anyway, I felt like the interviews were well done and fairly thorough. The commentary, like we said at the selectmen's meeting, was all pretty much like, why change the system that doesn't seem to be broken? Which leads me back to, I think, one of my first questions when I joined was, what happens if it sounds like there's kind of a handshake agreement that either the town clerk or the treasurer, one will be Republican and one will be Democrat, and each of those parties will put forth a candidate, and they've been fairly unopposed for however long, a very long period of time. But what happens if that handshake agreement, if it's not written into our charter, is not adhered to, or somebody comes into power that doesn't feel the same way as the handshake agreement has already gone? I don't want to stir up a whole bag of worms, but it just seems like there's like a kind of a strange little agreement for as long as the charter is, that there's an agreement that is just kind of like we'll just see what happens, and we'll put somebody forward. And then what happens if those people that are put forward are really not, we're very lucky to have very qualified, very invested people who have gotten themselves certified into the roles they are, but what happens if somebody comes along and they aren't, what recourse do we have in the charter that says, where do we go from here? We just have to wait till the next election cycle? How much damage can be done during that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the agreement goes, I mean, it's, I think some of it is just out of the fact that we've had very strong incumbents in those roles, and it would be a very high bar to unseat one of those incumbents. So I think that's one reason the parties have not challenged the incumbents. I mean, we have, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, there was a contest for town clerk. I think when Kathy was elected, it was competitive.
And that was Republican versus Democrat?
Yeah, so there's nothing that prevents anybody from getting nominated to run.
Exactly.
But I think it's just more out of, a practical matter that, we've had very strong incumbents that, would have been very hard to beat, so neither party is chosen to put up an opposing candidate.
Nothing's stopping anybody from running against some of these
Right.
strong incumbents.
I think I agree what Beth's comments is Kathy Harrington. Beth's comment, what it makes me think is the statements that we heard from our incumbents that, well, if people are not happy with, I'm answerable to the residents, and if they're not happy with my work, I'll be voted out. That's not necessarily the case, is the way things go in our town right now. In the sense of, if they're still put up by the party as the only candidate, no one runs against them, there is no other option to vote for. So I think it cuts, both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I do
In the
think,
current climate, who cares? Because we have great people working in these positions, but if the climate were different, and we're having this conversation in 5 years, and there's all different people in these positions, and we're not happy, and we have no recourse, that's a little bit troubling that we've done nothing to at least add some language maybe. Maybe we're not changing anything about how elected versus appointed, thank you for the word. But maybe we are putting some language in that finds a way to protect us if we find ourselves in a position where whoever's been elected is not performing their duties. I don't know, just thought.
I'll go next. Mike Haynes. I'm going to attack things a little differently. I guess, from listening to everyone, including public comment about, expanding what we look at, me personally, I'm not sure that that I see a need at this point to really expand the focus, at least that I look at, unless others feel differently. The things that, I guess drew my attention was, the town treasurer as an example, and I think Mr. Gothier made a good point about the bonding, but I thought from Casey's comments that she was bonded.
I don't want to interrupt, but that's what I have in my handout notes as well
Yeah.
from the 11th, is that it was bonded and they
Thank you.
said they were bonded. So sorry, just to,
To what extent, I
Yeah,
don't
good.
know the exact number.
So assuming that that's accurate, right, then I don't see a need to go down that rabbit hole. It seems like that's pretty well settled. I think the other aspect of it is, that particular position, is a bit different than the other two that we've been asked to look at, in that that position has a hired manager basically to report to, meaning the director of finance. So that person does not report to the first selectman, unlike the town clerk and the tax collector. So I think it is a little bit different. But I think generally speaking, my focus is strictly on those three. The one comment that I would make is with regards to being able to censure elected officials in town if the need arises, and is that sufficient as it's laid out in our charter? So I guess, for me, that's kind of where my focus has been after hearing everything that has been commented on.
Did we go around? and say-
yeah, that makes sense. Jeremy Lambert, yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said here. I just, from my thought process and sort of what I've been hearing from the town, I was kind of taking a high-level view in terms of what, in part, listening to Colin and expressing sort of what was some of his drivers behind, creating the commission, starting that, looking back at what was sort of already rejected by the town from a historical perspective, and then also from some of the voices that we've heard. And it seems like the general consensus is, if we were to put forth a direct change to make all of these hired, that it doesn't sound like it would pass again to me. So just thinking about it in that context, I do agree with a lot of the feedback that we've heard, again, what you stated too, in terms of there's not a lot of ability to correct, sort of Band-Aid put in place, or if we have some type of event happen. I jokingly at work, I like to use the example, what happens if somebody wins the lottery, right? Like, they pack their bags and they go and they retire and they're gone. How do we deal with that as a town? And the language in the charter as it's written now doesn't seem strong enough or have any sort of ability to really correct or fix for that. And again, too, from the nefarious side of things, right, if a bad actor gets in, regardless of party affiliation, what steps can be done for the town to protect itself, and then maybe put in oversight or, again, make a correction from that standpoint. So just looking at it from that standpoint, it doesn't feel like the town has I'm not opposed to talking about that if that's the direction we go, but it just doesn't feel like the town has an appetite to make that change directly from elected positions to hired positions. But it does feel like we have an opportunity here to affect some real change by maybe looking at the charter and reinforcing or implementing things that give the selectmen the ability to act upon bad actors, and maybe even in emergencies or in like cases where the person cannot or is unwilling to fulfill their duties. I guess that's my thinking of it at this point.
Just a follow-up with you,
Sure.
Ray Dalrymple. From my understanding, there were processes and policies in place. Are you just saying they're not strong enough?
Yeah, it felt like in some instances they weren't strong enough. I mean, we touched a little bit about the ethics board, and then there was some question, I believe, from the town attorney on if there was even an ability to really remove an elected official, if we didn't really have a process, or it doesn't seem like there's a legal process to do that. So are there other alternatives that we could explore? Again, the only option may be to switch that position to a higher position. That could be the case. But again, I just kind of look back at what the town's already voted on in the past, some of the very strong opinions that we've heard, and I just don't think that that is realistically something we could get the town to accept and pass. And so just kind of trying to be a little pragmatic about it. What can we get the town to accept with keeping these positions elected, but also sort of acknowledging the concerns that Colin has and a lot of the other a lot of the other members of the town have had. We have these great people now, but what if we don't? And how do we implement proper, I don't know, call them safety measures, fail protocols, something like that, and that to me sounds like something that would be more broadly accepted by the town, and also kind of maybe move us at least one step in the right direction toward a place where we could get confidence that the town would then maybe be having more confidence in going to eventually a more hired or town manager structure. So again, I'm kind of thinking about it in baby steps, and it just doesn't feel like the town is ready for that yet. But again, that's just my assessment from what I've heard.
Thanks, Jeremy. Ray Dalrymple again. We had some great input from the three people holding the tax collector, treasurer, and town clerk's position. Jill Valkowski, Casey Colson, Kathy Dunai. We had some excellent input from prior First Selectman, Colin Knoll, Edward McEnany, Tom Fernay? Fernay.
Yeah.
Okay. I should know that by now. And it surprised me a little bit that all three of those positions indicated that they would like to remain an elected position, which kind of surprised me a little bit, because I had heard kind of through grapevine that that wasn't the case for one individual at least. We always get a comment, or the town always gets a comment when these charter revision commissions come up, that we want to switch to a town manager in town. I've been here all my life, and that goes back quite a ways. And what I've explained to people is that the town manager, proposing a town manager charter revision commission is the third rail of politics in Suffield. It's like, electing a president that wants to mess around with Social Security, I guess. So the town, I guess, have put in the charter revisions in the past to vote on switching to town manager, and it's gone down in flames big time every single time. And I think one of the selectmen, I think it was Ed, that indicated, well, going to a town manager, you kind of lose the character and the charm of a small town. And I completely agree with that, growing up here, because I like this small town. I love this small town. That's why I stay here. That's why my two kids went to school here, and that's why I remain here and don't buy a house in Fort.
Even the golf is covered.
Year round.
Although I go down there for 6 weeks during the winter, but I'm back for maple syrup season.
Very smart.
Yeah, so I would, my feeling is that the three positions, and you made a very good point, Jeremy, about do we want to look further into, But I'm not sure whether that was something that had to be rewritten in the ethics language, which was not our purview.
Okay.
But I'm not, maybe Eric can comment on that. But my take is that I would not change these 3 positions from being elected to appointed right now. And that's my bottom line.
I'm gonna skip to you since I'm just,
Mhm.
I'll speak
Yeah.
at the end if you want. Okay. Thank you, Kathy Harrington. So I think these are all excellent comments, and it's been really good to hear how everyone else views it. You know, I come at it from different angles. I was looking at the information more like piecemeal potential questions I had about them. But I guess for me, I'm more interested in having the residents tell me. I mean, I think it would be better for the residents to actually vote on these and to tell us what they want. I understand, I think, what Jeremy's comment and also yours, Ray, about what we've heard so far in public comment, and it's not meant as disrespect for anybody who's made public comment, but we've only heard from a handful of people. We have a large town, and certain things that people may come out to our meetings and speak out against are voted up by a huge wide margin, or things, we might have things in a meeting that go very smoothly, and then we go to town meeting and they're voted down like resounding failures. It's like we just had with the blight ordinance, went down 60 to 24 vote. That's a big loss. And even though we had people come and speak about it, and we were changing the language to accommodate their comments that were all really good and thoughtful, and we thought we did a great job, as best job we could, it still wasn't good enough, and there were people who had additional concerns. And I just see it as, I feel like we've only heard from a small group of our residents as to what they would want or not. And it very well may be that they don't want change. I think you're probably right. I haven't been in town as long as you have. I've only been here about 15, 16 years.
And you're much younger than me as well.
I don't know about that, but, so, I don't think that, I think going for a town manager and bringing that all in this time, I don't really see an appetite for it either. But I did have I did think on the treasurer position, I thought the information that you got about the other towns, showing that almost all the other ones kind of similar to us around us, 91% of that 10 out of the 11 are appointed versus elected. I do think that if we were to recommend that for the treasurer, we should also recommend, if it were to pass or not, updating the job description. I think that would be really huge. I was looking at the information that we have for the town clerks, and I saw that the list of current positions was from 2015, so I felt like it was really dated, and I felt like it didn't really give us a good look at kind of the percentage of what is elected versus, I don't know if we could get something more updated.
Yeah, it was the most recent I was able to find.
And it did show, at that time, which is almost 9 years, it's 9 years ago, is not 72% are elected and 28 are appointed. I don't know if that's still, if it's closer to 50-50 or not. I think that's important information. I think also important for our residents.
The treasurer, sorry.
I'm
to
sorry,
interrupt,
that's the town clerk.
Yeah, and the treasurer information that you just quoted, is that
Eric just
recent?
pulled that up, I think,
So
as
that's-
recent.
Yeah, I couldn't find a list statewide, but
He
I just
created
looked at
himself.
Okay,
towns similar to our size and neighboring towns.
Yes.
And so that's like a current, for those 11 towns, is current as of 2024. And then I noticed that the information that we got from the town clerk, because I think it sometimes is helpful to see what they do and, to see, do we want someone who's appointed and that would be qualified in those positions. The information, and I was remote that night, so I don't know if there was discussion. It was also a little garbled at the very beginning. I noticed that the document said that it's from 2008.
This is
That
the
came-
job description.
No, this was the breakdown of
Oh.
the duties, was from 2008, and it also references New Fairfield as opposed to Suffield, so it tells me this is probably something that the town clerk got from a different town clerk when they started, which I think is great, but I don't know that it's been updated and shows us an accurate view of what the job entails now, and whether that person, if it's so specialized that they actually should be appointed as opposed to elected, because I think a lot of the concerns that Beth raised, I also have, as to, a political party just putting up someone, and that's the only choice that we have, regardless. Yes, right now I think it's been great, but we don't know for that going forward. And then just for the town treasurer, I was just, I didn't know if we were gonna maybe ask for additional information, if that's possible. I was wondering if she could give us a more detailed description as to what efforts are made to collect unpaid property taxes versus the motor vehicle tax, because she went into detail with the motor vehicle tax but not the property tax. She just said that we have liens in there in place to collect when need be, and I just wanted a little bit more information about that. That's kind of my
So, and I'll talk about the town clerk and tax collector position first. So this is my 4th charter revision mission over a span of, say, 30 years or so. And I would say this question has come up every time, that all 4 have looked at it, and the first 3 times it was determined that it was not something that we wanted to pursue. I think a lot of it was, if it's broke, don't. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We haven't had an issue, and it's working, so let's not change it. I mean, I would say this is the first time we've had a first selectman advocate for it, but I don't know that I've heard a compelling case that says we should be changing it. I mean, I think ultimately, are we going to have to move to making it an appointed position? We may have to, but I mean, I just don't see anything right now that calls to me that says now's the time to make this change. And maybe we'll get a stinker of a town clerk or tax collector someday, and that will make us want to change it. But I just right now, from my perspective, for those 2 positions, I just don't think there's anything that we need to recommend there. But that's my opinion on those. As far as the treasurer goes, I mean, when I looked to see what other towns had, I was kind of surprised that whereas
Didn't think that it was appropriate to move that forward, didn't think that there was town support for it. Just getting back to the 3 positions, me personally, from everything that I've heard, especially from the town clerk and the tax collector, being part of the town, being a resident of the town, being part of the fabric of this community, they felt, and I think many townspeople that know those positions feel that it's good to have someone in town kind of representing them. Towns or areas. And, I certainly got that very distinctly from Jill, and I got that very distinctly from Kathy as well. And in my opinion, I haven't heard anything that really sways me to want to suggest something other than what we have for those 2 positions. The town treasurer, I think, is very different, and I think the data that Eric provided supports that. That's one position that I don't see that same type of aspect for the treasurer position as nearly as important. But I do have a lot of concern. I mean, that position has the keys to the kingdom, and has a lot of power, a lot of control, and that position also serves really at least two masters. The director of finance, the board of finance, first selectman, wears a lot of hats and does a lot. And I think having that position as appointed, I think would provide better direction but also, making that person more answerable to, the core person, which would be the director of finance, who, by the way, is appointed. So I just think that makes a lot more sense. So that's the way, at least at this point, that's what my head's at.
Just one point I want to bring up, because it feels like we're going in a direction, and I just want to formalize it to a certain degree, is the building commission is important, but I think maybe for this discussion, could we just table that, get through the discussion on these 3 positions, and if we have time left over, great. If we don't, then maybe as part of our recommendations, the selectmen is maybe ask for more time or another commission to pursue that. I do think they can help, but it feels like this is a robust enough topic that it's going to take most of our attention.
Yeah, I would say while we're talking about these 3 positions, let's focus on that. And
Okay.
There's nothing that precludes us from talking about other things either later tonight or future meetings.
Yep. Okay.
So, I mean, it sounds like as far as the tax collector and the town clerk go, I'm sensing a consensus. I know, Elizabeth, you expressed some concerns, but I think everybody else, I think I heard no change. Do we want to formalize that and vote on each of those to just say, somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we
We should do them individually.
to do it individually.
And can I ask a clarification
Sure.
before we do? And when we say no change, we're talking about just strictly elected versus appointed? We're not necessarily saying looking at the job description or other?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we take a vote on whether or not we would like the 2 positions of tax collector and town clerk to remain elected officials. I didn't
Friendly
write that right,
amendment,
did
friendly
I?
help, right? I think you should make it like either that, that we should not present it to the Board of Selectmen, or that we should present it to the Board of Selectmen to be, changed to appointed. You know what I mean, like more of an affirmative statement, like maybe like you would like something to the effect of like, because I don't have a vote here and I don't know, should I think just a suggestion, like I'm thinking something like, I make a motion that we do not recommend to the Board of Selectmen, they make a change to the clerk position being elected, and then you could do the tax collector, something to that effect.
I make a motion that we do not recommend or present to the selectmen to change the tax collector and the town clerk from elected to appointed positions. How's that?
Okay.
Thanks,
There's a
Coach.
second.
Thank you, Coach.
Okay. All right, so the motion is that we're recommending they remain
There's no change to
appointed.
the
No
tax.
change. Yep.
Tax
Okay.
and town clerk positions.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Should somebody say?
Yes, Mike
Yeah,
did.
it is.
Oh, Mike, okay, great, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, just confirming that, I believe you said appointed, but you want them to remain elected, correct?
We're recommending they remain elected.
Yep.
Sorry. if I
No,
misspoke.
no worries, yeah.
Okay.
All in favor?
Any
Any other
Any other
discussion?
discussion?
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
No? Or- That narrows down the focus.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes sense.
No, it
Yeah,
is
we're very
good.
focused now.
Right, so that doesn't mean that maybe we might want to make recommendations to the job description or recommendations about the way it's managed or things like that, but I think we've decided that we're not recommending that they move to appointed positions.
Yeah.
Okay, so treasurer, I mean, do we want to explore that in more detail?
I mean, the only other thing that I was thinking about as we were talking about it, and you were kind of mentioning we're a $60 million operation, which I kind of knew that, but it didn't click until you said it. As I was also looking back at my notes, and sort of the stipend that the treasurer gets now is like $15,000. So we have a stipend of $15,000
And
running
it
at
just moved up.
Right, and it just
Yeah, it
moved
was-
up.
It was minuscule
So-
before that.
Yeah, we have a $15,000 stipend managing a $60 million operation. That certainly sounds a little, a little lopsided. It does kind of, at least for me personally, reopen the idea of, I've heard a lot of things on appointed and elected, but I feel like there's gotta be some sort of adjustment there. I do want to very reinforce this by saying I have no doubts about the person who's in that position now. This is not to disparage anyone, but I mean, that's a big delta, you know, to have somebody coming in, you know, just with $15,000 to manage $60 million. That is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think Casey's done a tremendous job.
Absolutely.
And there's no question about her integrity or the effort level that she puts in, but I think, you know, just from an evolutionary standpoint, that, you know, the way the town conducts business has changed. The world is more complex. I just think, you know, the role is, you know, is just evolved, and I don't know that we've kept up with it. I mean, I would say that there was just an election last November, so, I mean, I think there's 3+ years left in that term. So, I mean, I would be fine if we're making changes to say, you know, the changes take effect after the current term ends. Yeah, that would give us time to, you know, figure out how to integrate it into the town's, you know, the way the town operates, gives the board of finance time to budget for it, and things like that. So, you know, I don't think this is that we're taking somebody's job away tomorrow. I think it's just, you know, if we decide to make a change, that it will happen, you know, in the future in a, you know, a planned method. So.
But I think you make a good point. But I think, and Eric knows this much better than I do, but that position has a lot of support. So it's not, you know, Casey doesn't spend hours upon hours, you know, working through that. I mean, I agree with exactly what you're saying. But,
Sorry, yeah.
But I just want to kind of put a little bit more focus on, you know, the number of hours that she ends up working. And I think having her experience and knowledge is the key. It's not as much, you know, it's not going to sound as well as I want it to sound, but it's not as much of the time that she puts in as it is her knowledge and expertise, right? So I agree with you, and that really kind of makes the point that I'm trying to make, is that, or along with that, is, you know, having that as an appointed position, you know, now we've got, you know, the free market at work, right? So we can go out and hire, you know, quality people, and if it's 20,000, 25, 50,000, whatever it is, then we're going to pay market, right? But with an elected position, you're only going to get, you know, those people that are willing to spend that time for only $15,000. So it kind of, and that's why, to me, it makes more sense, especially that position.
So, Reed Dalrymple, I have a question, and it might be, and I don't want to put you on the spot, you may or may not be able to answer this. Being, you know, all my life in basically the private sector, accounting and finance, I'm not sure exactly how it works in a municipality, but I would imagine that the town gets audited every year,
Right.
right? Who is our auditors?
Mahoney and Sable.
Mahoney and Sable. So, besides making an unqualified position on the financial statements, right, whether they're good financial statements, other things that auditors look at is basically segregation of duties, and if there are any weaknesses in our present hierarchy, or who supervises who, or who checks each other's work, or whatever. I'm sure that if there was some blatant weakness of the town treasurer and oversight of that position, we would hear about it from the auditors, and we haven't heard about it. That doesn't mean that things can't be improved with oversight, but I would imagine that if there was a weakness in the reporting of that person, supervision, oversight, all that stuff, we would have heard about by auditors and it would have been corrected, right? Doesn't mean that things can't improve. I'm open to a discussion of that person, treasurer, being appointed versus elected. So I'm open to that discussion, especially the point that you made. I mean, cash management is a big thing, and it's a lot of number crunching, and you got to be right 100% of the time. That position, if it was appointed versus elected, I think we do have a weakness in that the pay is so low, and a person willing to do that job
Must love this
from
town.
town.
They
Took the
must.
words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
There.
But I do, besides an auditor pointing that out, that I think that is a relative weakness of that position. And if we did decide to put that to a town vote of being appointed, I would, because I think what Casey had indicated to us is that it's a lot more hours than what I think the job description indicates.
And it's literally every day.
Oh, it has to
It's
be
not-
every day.
It's not 8 hours every day, but it's, I mean, you're
Something.
looking at,
Right.
you're moving money, improving wires every single day.
Every day the bank is open,
Yeah.
right? So I would be open to that discussion.
So this is Elizabeth Kaplan. I'm also open to the discussion, but I wonder if there's anything that prevents a current elected official, such as Casey, to apply for the position if it became appointed. I assume that would be, I mean, obviously she's
Right.
really qualified.
Of course.
I think
Okay.
the actually said that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where, you know,
Maybe
if
one of the
we're,
ones I couldn't hear.
Yeah,
if we're interested in pursuing the topic, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily need to keep it that there is a separate role called treasurer. I think it could be that somebody else within the organizational structure assumes the treasurer duties and they become the treasurer. A lot of towns, it would be the director of finance, would also be the treasurer. I think, you know, we'd have to figure out what is, you know, how do we work out the segregation of duties so that, you know, we've got adequate controls. But I don't know that I see us having a full-time appointed treasurer. I mean, I think it's more, you know, maybe it's adding, we just went from a part-time to a full-time assistant in the director of finance office. Maybe it's adding a third person in the director of finance office. But I don't.
That would cover those duties?
Yeah, I don't necessarily see it as, you know, if we make it no longer an elected position, that it's a separate position.
Under the director of finance?
Yeah, it could just
In
be
that
that
office.
the duties are in that office somewhere. It's not
Call
necessarily
it
the.
cash manager or something like that.
Right.
That's a really
A couple of meetings ago, I had asked about whether there was a financial implication to the town if any of these positions moved from elected to appointed. And it sounds like this one would, because it seems like they're perhaps underpaid now, and by hiring somebody into this position, they'd be paying more. Did we ever get any information back on
Salaries.
salary, like, yeah, rough salaries
We did,
for this
yeah.
kind of position?
I mean, we can, I think CCM can get us some of that information.
They might be, I think, this is Kathy Harrington, I think Eric made some really good points that I didn't even think of, which is that you know, town may not have to hire an entirely new employee. It could just, the duties could be subsumed into the positions we already have, or maybe we would create another position, maybe it's part-time, maybe it's not, I'm not sure, I think those are great points. This might be where you might want to bring in Derek, like how specific would a proposed change to the charter have to be on this? Could it give flexibility or not? Would you need to decide more? I don't know that necessarily, and that'd be something you could ask him. I do know, just kind of to your point, we had gotten this, and if I didn't give this to you, I apologize, I'll make a copy for you. when we first started, before everybody started, we'd gotten a letter from a resident, Mr. Casey, and we did read it into the record, and it was one of the meetings that was not up, so I'll actually give you my
I
copy.
like they
of
don't
it.
have
And he had lived in Long Meadow when they had gone through kind of changes like this before, and one of the things he had mentioned, which was they had gone from like elected to some positions being appointed. And if I remember correctly, so he says here, after the transition from electing them became appointed, many of the former elected officials stayed on for a period of time. And then he was saying like that was such a good thing, and it was fortunate to work with them because then they could, make sure everything was in place and that things were seamless. So, and then it said that as the years went on, most of them either retired or moved on to other jobs, and so then they filled the positions with new people. So the people who were already in the positions kind of stayed in them, however that worked out. So I'll give you this letter from the resident, and I can just get another copy.
Is there a date on there?
Is there a date?
No.
Okay, from Mr. Casey. Yeah. I just thought that was interesting because, that would obviously be the goal, hopefully, would be, like we had said, we're not looking for wasn't looking for anybody to lose their jobs if they have, for sure. So that was from the first meeting, and
I like that he calls us honorable charter commission members.
yes, it's very nice. It's a great letter. It was very nice for him to share his experiences in Long Meadow.
Yeah, I remember reading.
So it sounds like there's an appetite to do some more digging into this topic.
Treasurer.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems like it would be appropriate to bring in the director of finance, and get her thoughts on, if we were to roll it into the office, how that might work. Maybe we could even talk to the auditors and see from, what they experience in other towns, or, what concerns they might have from an internal control standpoint. I mean, if we did move it into the office, everybody worked for the director of finance. I mean, you've got, all your banking and your cash management, your bank reconciliation, and everything's in that office. So, I want to understand what the control environment is going to be.
And I think right now, Casey works remotely most of the
Not
time.
entirely.
office.
She said 3 afternoons a week she comes in, and then a lot of the other work can be done remotely, she had said. So she said average 10 to 15 hours per week. Obviously, he doesn't get into it.
Right. Like every morning, from home, she can go in to the bank and see what, if there's cash that needs to be moved, wires that need to be approved, that kind of thing. She doesn't necessarily need to be in the office for that. I mean, I think when, you heard from Christine, I think when Christine was there, she was in the office less than Casey is, but she had a full-time job outside of the treasurer's office, so, I mean, they both do a great, Christine did a great job, Casey does a great job. They just had different styles. Okay.
Would it be, could we also touch points with both of them, get a rough guesstimate? I don't know if I have that for my notes in terms of how many hours a week, a month that they're committing to the position, just so that way we have a ballpark. I don't think that needs a full interview, I can email it.
I can just send her a note. So, do we want to talk to the director of finance?
Yeah.
And I think to Kathy's point, Derek as well. And
Auditors,
Yeah, and I
if they are
told
available.
Derek he didn't need to be here tonight, so he otherwise would have
And
been.
do you think you could just reach out to the auditors and maybe just kind of take their temperature on
Sure.
having all that responsibility under the director of finance office?
That's a really good point, because if they're like, oh, plenty of towns do this, we help them, we give them like XYZ guidance, and we help them implement it. If it's like not a big deal,
I
that
don't
would be
even
nice
do
to know.
anything but increase internal controls.
Yeah,
Sure. Okay.
that's a good idea, instead of asking them to come necessarily. They might charge the town.
I mean, maybe
Yeah, exactly.
you could even have them patch something by phone. I don't think they would need to come here, but, okay. I mean, we might want to
Say like
talk to
this
some of these people
Enfield.
from other towns.
But Enfield is appointed, East Granby, Granby, Summers.
Is there one that recently went through the transition, do we know of?
I don't have that information.
Okay, just curious.
Well, we can look to see what we can find, but, and we could see if we can bring somebody in from one of these other towns and see how they
Handle
operate.
the transition,
Or just how they
how they operate now.
with, because I don't know that, I think most of these towns, my recollection was that it was incorporated into the finance office. It wasn't a separate appointed treasurer position. Like I think Summers has a CFO, and so it's part of the office of the CFO, the duties are in there.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Make it headway.
I think so.
I think so.
Okay, do we want to table the, any discussion about any other topics that we heard about for tonight?
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
put that on the next agenda. Okay. So, as far as next meeting dates go, we didn't set a calendar beyond tonight, so, I mean,
We need to be a little bit flexible based on when we can get Director of Finance to come in, maybe as one of our first points of contact.
yeah, we should probably set a number of meeting dates.
Oh, that.
Yeah, I just gotta know that they can't hear the audio. So-
So I think everybody gave you their, like, availability for Thursdays, right? I think you solicited that
Did I?
Yeah.
information.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can be flexible for other days. I know there were a certain number of Thursdays that weren't good.
Yeah,
And then
Yeah.
other people were saying, well, I can do other dates, and I can as well. I mean, I feel.
Okay. All right, well, I did do a matrix and I didn't bring that with me tonight, so I'll get back to everybody with potential dates and we'll find something that works for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, because I think, Mike, you're gonna be gone for a few weeks. so-
Okay.
Yeah, and other days during the week, I guess we don't have to do Thursday.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, yeah, I
Right.
think we just settled on Thursday because it seemed to work for everybody.
Especially through the end of the summer is what we were looking at when we
Right.
set
Yeah.
those dates.
An opening, that
Yeah.
might open up some more flexibility.
Pretty much every day but Monday works for me. so.
And then it's just cross deciding on the location, which I think you can do after since we have
Sure.
options. so it's
Right.
okay.
Okay.
And I promise to pay more attention to location. So I was late, that's fine.
yeah, I'm pretty flexible through September to 26th, I'll be away.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's gonna take more than a couple meetings, so that's it. Okay. Before I go to public comment, anybody have anything else? No? All right, is there any public comment? Andy?
Yep, Annie Hornish, 864 Thrall. The only comment I'd make is the Ethics Commission came up tonight. They don't do too much right now. They're very limited in their powers. And I would suggest that that be clearly defined in the charter and the scope of their powers, significantly expanded. Thank you.
No? Okay. All right, they said they couldn't hear.
I did not do a good job the first meeting myself, so I don't know anybody. The technology can be tough. Every system is different. So, all right, so we don't need dates.
Tom, can you hear us now?
Thanks for just I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Tom, can you hear us
It's
now?
friendly amendments, friendly help. It can be tough.
Now you can hear us?
Now we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Sorry about that. We're actually at the public comment point, so I don't know if you have any comments, Tom? But no, we can't hear you. Hold on. say something now? Oh, there you go.
I just came to listen. I don't have any thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it. I'll listen to the tape.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody.
I may not have, I took a couple